John from Ripewave Audio back again with Marantz's latest AV receiver, the Cinema 30. And this unit sells for $4,500 in the United States. And this will be our fifth video in the series. And today we're going to compare an Auro3D speaker layout, a 13.1 layout, against a Dolby Atmos layout, which would be a 9.2.4 configuration, and how this interprets it differently, whether you have the Atmos speaker layout or the Auro3D speaker layout. Now, fortunately, you can switch between the two. We covered sound modes in the last video, part 4. And when we got done with it, we posted it, some of you said, well, why don't you go and do a comparison with Auro3D in some of these other modes, not just Auro3D source content. So here we are delivering on that request. But before we say goodbye to this unit, and if you've been following along, this unit can process 17 channels, and it can do it with a 7.4.6 configuration or a 9.4.4 configuration. And whether you balance it for Auro3D or Dolby Atmos on the speaker layout, this is how your counts will come out. And this is the most capable receiver Marantz has in its portfolio before you go to the separates and the AV10, which sells for a lot more money at $7,000. So with our comparison with these two layouts, you can see the differences here, what you'll get on your active speakers if you configure it one way versus the other. With Dolby Atmos and DTS-X, you can do your front wide speakers, and as well as your front, left, right, center, side surround, rear surround, and a couple of rows of heights, or get rid of those front wides and put a third row of heights. But we're doing the front wides in our configuration, and that's a little more dramatic when you compare it against Auro3D, which doesn't support front wides. And instead, they give you a couple of other options at the immersive level. And that is putting a top center height speaker, which some people call the voice of God, as well as a front center height speaker between the left and right speakers, but mounted up high above your television. And this will show up here. So both have really the same number of speakers in this case, but with the Auro3D, you're placing those different in the immersive layers. And to do this, we go into our speaker configuration and we use our second preset on our speakers. We have one for a Dolby Atmos configuration, that 9.2.4, and the other for the 13.1 Auro3D. And that 13.1 is defining your 3 height speakers at the front, mounted on the wall, one as a center height, one left and right heights, and then 2 rear height speakers that are mounted up high. And this is what makes this unique. And of course, that top center surround, the voice of God speaker. With this configuration, we'll see in which sound playback modes, with which content, with encoded, with various different content encoded in different ways, how that gets decoded and upmixed. Do all the speakers get used? Not all the time. And we're going to show you where they come on and where they don't. Once you have your speakers set up with one as standard Dolby Atmos layout, and the other one as Auro3D, we can go through with the same source material we did in the last video. And here we're just going to focus on the differences between the two different layouts. And we do this with the on-screen information. When you hit that info button, the first time you push it, it will show you the active sound modes. It will show you the source content next to the output, what your speakers are doing. And it gives you a really clear view about what's going on. So we started with a CD, Norah Jones in this case. It's just a 2-channel format, front left and front right. When you put it into this unit, if you have your main plus LFE set, now if you have just main, it's just going to do that front left and right, but we have it main plus LFE. It adds the subwoofer content on there, and you have that output. So it takes a 2.0 to a 2.1 And this is what happens with the Dolby layout, and with the Auro 3D, it's the same thing. Not making use of those extra Auro 3D channels, the center height or the top surround, and then the Dolby Atmos isn't making use of the front wides. It's just focusing on that original content, not upmixing. And if you're not familiar what upmixing is, it takes the source content, the number of channels there, and tries to deliver it to more channels that you have configured in your system. So if you have 5.1, 7.1, or some of the immersive, depending on the sound mode, it will do the upmix. But not in stereo mode. It will try to stay as faithful to the original source, only adding in the subwoofer with that .1. And we see this is the same when we hit the direct mode, that no difference there. And then we hit Dolby Surround. This is where it now branches out to all of the speakers. The 2 rows of heights that we have, the front wides, all active, whether we have it with the 2 rows of heights and the front wides are enabled. But then we look down at the Auro 3D layout and we see, of course, we don't have the front wides on that, but it isn't spreading it to the center height or the top surround speaker. So while the Dolby upmixer brings it to all its speakers, you're not getting it with the Auro 3D. It's not upmixing it to those 2 additional channels. That's very interesting, right? But you still get your front height, left and right, your rear, left and right heights are still being active. You still have that subwoofer with the Auro 3D. When you're using Neural X with an Auro 3D layout, it will upmix to the center height and the top surround speaker. So there's a difference there. With the Auro 3D upmixer, again, it's upmixing to center height and top surround. And then when you Auro surround, that's keeping everything at ear level. It's not using the immersive channels. So naturally we wouldn't get center height or top surround on that, but we're not also getting the front and rear height speakers with the Auro surround. As far as the immersive format that's not delivering it to center height and top surround, that is the Dolby Surround upmixer. It's not doing that. Let's look at another source, a DSD with 2 channels. So we're using, again, the voice that is Johnny Hartman CD that we have. This is very good. This is pretty good for a pretty old recording. An input signal, 2 channel like the last one, and we're seeing the same results with a stereo mode set on the Marantz Cinema 50. Subwoofer plus left and right, and the same thing if we go to the Auro 3D layout. Direct, no difference there. Dolby Surround, again, isn't upmixing to center height or top surround, but that Dolby Atmos upmixer is bringing it to all the channels that it supports. Neural X, going to all the speakers, whether it's an Atmos or Auro 3D layout. Auro 3D, with an Atmos speaker layout, it's not using the front wides, but with an Auro 3D layout, it's going to center height and top surround. Again, if you go to Auro Surround, it drops those height channels altogether. Here's a Super Audio CD 5.1 source, Dark Side of the Moon. And when we listen to this, it's detecting 5.1 on the input. Dolby Atmos is down mixing, not up mixing in this case, because we've got to get to a stereo signal. It's bringing it to a 2.1. Well, an Auro 3D layout in stereo mode is doing the same, down to 2.1. With direct mode, though, it's representing all those channels. So you're getting 5.1 on your output, regardless of your layout, the standard 5.1 layout. Multi-channel in sound mode, again, 5.1. Multi-channel in plus Dolby Surround now is going to your immersive channels, your height channels. But with Auro 3D, you're not getting center height or top surround. Multi-in with Neural X, going to all the speakers. Auro 3D sound mode with this content is not doing front wides with Dolby Atmos layout, but is doing center height and top surround with the Auro 3D layout. Of course, Auro Surround is dropping those height channels, so no surprises there. We next looked at our quadrophonic source. So when a lot of these groups that were late 60s, early 70s that were very popular, would mix at the time of recording a quadrophonic mix as well. And sometimes that mix has a little different content in it as well as dividing up the instruments in unique ways between 2 front and 2 rear speakers. And this is one of them. And we did a review on this in the past. But this is a box set that came out recently that's encoded with a DTS-HD Master audio. And we look at this, and if we put it on stereo mode, it will down mix those 4 channels down to a 2.1, whether it's Dolby Atmos or Auro3D speaker layout. When you go to direct mode though, it's using those 4 channels, but adding a center channel on both of these in direct mode, which I feel is a little odd. How is that direct if you're now deriving a center channel? And then DTS plus Dolby Surround is going to all the speakers. With Auro3D layout, you're not getting the center height or top surround. When you go to DTS-HD, this is kind of the native format of this, you get something kind of odd with Dolby Atmos speaker layout. It's also going to your surround backs as well as those 4 channels. So you're not getting really the native 4 channel source that was originally encoded on the disc in any of these modes. And notice now with DTS, it's not doing upmixing as it would in a normal Neural X. With Auro3D though, we are getting upmixing to the immersive channels, just not the front wides with a Dolby layout, but we are getting the center height and top surround with Auro3D. And of course, Auro Surround is everything but those height speakers. We next looked at a Dolby Digital Plus 5.1 source. Now, if you take one of the newer discs, like here is a 4K Ultra High Definition disc. Now, this is advertised as a Dolby Atmos disc, but it has extra audio channels. So when we go into the setup for the audio on this, just for testing purposes, I can go to the French soundtrack, which is a 5.1 Dolby Audio soundtrack, to test out sources here, and we'll go through the other ones as we go. So with 5.1, with the Dolby Digital Plus, we're seeing here the 5.1 coming in as the input signal. And with the Dolby output, with stereo mode, it's doing 2.1, and it's same thing with the Auro layout. With direct pushed, you get that same 5.1 layout on the output for Dolby Atmos or Auro3D speaker layouts. So you're not making use of any of the immersive channels or the rear surrounds. When you change the sound mode to Dolby Digital, Dolby Surround, you get all the channels coming through, but with the Auro3D layout, you're not getting the center height or top surround. With the Dolby Digital Plus Neural X upmixer, you're getting all the channels as well, but with the Auro speaker layout, you're getting that center height and top surround, and the same with Auro3D. The center height plus top surround with the Auro speaker layout. No front wides on the Dolby layout. And Auro Surround is just dropping all those immersive channels with that Auro layout. Moving to a DTS-HD Master Audio Blu-ray with a 5.1 source, we found this on ET, the extraterrestrial. So we go into the setup here. Again, we have to drop it to the French soundtrack to get the 5.1 mix with DTS. When we do that, we see the input as 5.1. On stereo mode, we're getting 2.1 output regardless of the layout. And then if we switch it to direct mode, we're getting 5.1 on the input and the same on the output. So no surprises there on the direct mode. On DTS surround mode, we're getting everything including the rear surround speakers. So it's doing some upmixing to the rear surrounds, regardless of whether it's an Atmos or Auro3D layout. It's no immersive channels at this point. If we go to DTS plus Dolby Surround, now we're getting all the speakers involved with the Dolby Atmos layout, but with Auro3D, not the center height or the top surround. Those come in when you switch it to Neural X, and they pop in just fine. With the Auro3D upmixing, it's going to everything on an Auro layout, but not the front wides on a Dolby Atmos layout. Aural surround is dropping all those immersive height speakers. Then we looked at a Dolby Digital Plus as a 7.1 source. And this we popped back in the Super Mario Brothers. This time went to the Spanish soundtrack to get 7.1. And we can see the input is 7.1. With stereo mode, we get 2.1 on the output, regardless of speaker layout. With it set to direct mode, we're getting 7.1 on the output, regardless of speaker layout. Changing the sound mode to Digital Dolby Plus, we're getting 7.1 on both of the speaker layouts. Change it to Dolby Digital plus Dolby Surround. Now we're bringing in the immersive channels for the Atmos layout with front wides, but on Auro3D, we're not getting the center height or top surround. With Neural X sound mode, getting all the speakers in both cases for both layouts, including the center height and top surround on an Auro3D layout. With Auro3D as the sound mode, we're not getting the front wides with Atmos, but we're getting center height and top surround with Auro3D. Aural surround, as you might have guessed, was dropping all the immersive channels. We next went to a DTS-HD Master Audio 7.1 source, and we found this on Star Wars The Force Awakens. You can go into the languages and set this as such. This is the best format on this particular version of the disc. And we can see here on the input a 7.1. In stereo mode, that drops it down mixes to 2.1, regardless of your speaker layout. And with direct mode, though, you get 7.1 on your output, regardless of the speaker layout. With sound mode at DTS-HD, we're getting 7.1 on the output. So that is no difference there between the two speaker configurations. And you set it to DTS-HD plus Dolby Surround. Now it's going to the immersive channels for Dolby layout, including front wides. Auro3D, you're not getting center height or top surround. So you would be better to choose Neural X, which adds those in if you have an Auro3D layout. Dolby's going to give you the front wides with a Neural X upmixing. Auro3D, sound mode, no front wides, but we're getting center height and top surround, and Aural surround, dropping those immersive channels. And now to the immersive native content with Dolby Atmos. Here we used a 7.1.4 source, the Mario Brothers. This is the main soundtrack of the movie that we have our copy in. And we can see here the input signal is showing as 7.1 because the immersive channels are riding over that. And you set it to stereo mode, it's down mixing to 2.1. You set it now to direct mode, it's going to all the channels. Because the content is native as Atmos, we get all the channels even with the direct mode. On the Auro3D layout, that does not include center height or top surround on direct mode. With a Dolby Audio True HD sound mode, we're getting 7.1 on Dolby Atmos as well as Auro3D, none of the immersive channels. With sound mode as Atmos, we're getting all of the Dolby Atmos speakers running, but with the Aural layout, not the center height or top surround. With Neural X, all the speakers in both speaker layouts. Auro3D drops the front wides with a Dolby layout, but gives you center height and top surround with an Aural layout. And Aural surround is dropping the immersive channels. For DTS-X, we could bring back ET, the extraterrestrial. And for that, we'd go into the languages. That's the number one choice. This is the main audio track for this disc. And I think it's one of the only ones we have. They're hard to find, these DTS-X native source content. Most of the things are Dolby Atmos nowadays, particularly here in the US. And in stereo mode, we can see that the input is just labeled as DTS-X. It's not showing you individual channels with its immersive nature of that format. And of course, this is down mixing. It gives you stereo +1, so 2.1 in both cases for stereo for the speaker layouts. Direct mode, though, tells a different story. Everything lights up on a Dolby Atmos layout. For Auro3D speaker layout, the same. So center channel and top surround are working fully in this case. With DTS-X as the mode, again, all the speakers are lighting up. So no difference between direct and DTS-X mode. And that's really all you get for choices when you're got a DTS-X content, just stereo, direct, and DTS-X. I think is really two in reality. Auro3D, there's of course all these formats from 9.1 up to 13.1. We even can find 8.0 and 8.1 content in the demo CD that we have. We don't have any content that's 13.1, although in the past we've streamed that in some cases. But using the demo CD that Auro sent us, we have a 9.1 configuration, which is the 5 speakers at ear level. The rear ones are side surrounds, and we've got the front and rear heights that are present here to give you the 9 channels. This is one of the cuts on the demo CD. Putting it to stereo mode, it down mixes to 2.1 in both speaker layouts. With direct mode, we're getting 5.1 content on both cases. When we go to DTS-HD, the rear surrounds come in, although that rear content isn't native on a 9.1 Auro3D. When we go to DTS-HD plus Dolby Surround, all the speakers are lighting up on Atmos layout. On Auro layout, everything but the center height and top surround. Neural X gives you the center height and top surround. We're getting the front wides, we're getting everything with that Neural X up mixer. With an Auro3D up mixer, everything is being lit up on the Auro3D, but not the front wides. So very consistent there. And an Auro surround, everything but those immersive channels. We looked at a 10.1 content for Auro3D. What this is adding from 9.1 to 10.1 is that top surround, that center height voice of God channel. Here was some content that we had on the demo CD that gives you that 10.1 in stereo mode, down mixing to 2.1, direct, it's giving you 5.1, so no different than the 9.1 Auro3D. And then the DTS-HD, bring in those rear surrounds, but still not going up to the immersive channels. And then DTS-HD plus Dolby Surround, everything for Atmos layout. With an Auro3D layout, we're getting everything but center height and top surround. Neural X brings in that center height and top surround. You still have the front wides with an Atmos layout. Auro3D, no front wides with a Dolby layout, but you get the center height and top surround. And then again, Auro surround, no immersive channels. 11.1 Auro content. This is bringing in, as well as the top center speaker, now we have a center height speaker that's native in the content. And for this, the Rise of Guardians, a little clip was that on that demo CD. We can see now the input signal is showing up as 5.1. This is riding over DTS. All this Auro3D content rides on a DTS and then gets extra things decoded, which makes it Auro3D. But this will down mix to 2.1 with stereo mode. For direct mode, you're getting a 5.1 signal in both cases. With the DTS-HD decoder, you're getting 7.1 in both cases. And then when you go to DTS-HD plus Dolby Surround, all the speakers, including the front wides, but with Auro layout, not the center height, not the top surround. And then finally with the Neural X, we can see that it is giving you all the speakers, including front wides with a Dolby, and the center height and top surround for Auro3D, which is the same case for the Auro3D decoder. And it's not until you go into the Auro3D decoder that you see that input signal light up with the top surround, the center height channel, all these things that would normally be showing on a DTS soundtrack. Now we're seeing the full capability of the input source with that center height and the top surround in there. And naturally, it goes to those when it gets decoded in the output. Of course, the Dolby Atmos output has not the front wides. Aural Surround removes those immersive channels, but we can still see them in the input source. And that wraps it up for this review of how different layouts give you different speaker options. While you think you may be able to upmix to all the speakers, you're not able to do it in certain cases, and you may have to play around with the different sound modes that the Marantz and also Denon receivers are capable of doing. But I think as a receiver that has some of the best support for all the immersive formats, I don't think you can go wrong with Denon or Marantz. And when you get into the units like the Cinema 30 or the Denon equivalent as the AVR X6800H, you've got those 2 extra channels, the front wides, and the ability to do a real full Auro3D 13.1 speaker layout with its 17 channels of processing, up to 4 subwoofers included in that mix. You've got a pretty powerful system. And so I think if you want a receiver that can pretty much handle it all, you can't go wrong with the Marantz Cinema 30 or its Denon equivalent. So what are your thoughts? Would like to see your feedback. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. And if you want to take your involvement to the next level, we have our Patreon channel at www.patreon.com/Ripewave. Would love to see you in that community. You can also hit that thanks button, which you can leave us a one-time donation, always appreciated, but it doesn't cost anything to hit that bell notification so you are informed when the next video is posted. Until then, keep evolving your audio experience.